Hey guys, Dabadoo here. So I just want to go over my new starter build that I have planned for Path of Exile 2, the 0.3 League, and that is a Blood Mage. And doesn't require any special items. You could put like a Dodri's Damning Ring on here, but that's a pretty cheap unique, and that just basically lets you get an additional curse. You can already run 2 curses with this build as it is, without any special items. What is the concept behind this build? Why Blood Mage? What's the deal? Well, I think it'll just be a really comfortable starter character. This is a free Ascendancy now, so you don't have to pay a point for this, so that makes Blood Mage as an Ascendancy stronger itself. The first thing you're going to want to get is a Vitality Siphon, so all of your spells will leech life as well, which is great. And of course, you're going to need that because all your spells will cost life. In addition to that, you'll be pretty tanky because you got Grasping Wounds and Crimson Power. You're going to want to be basically wearing a full ES body armor to get the extra flat life on this build. And then you're going to be running Open Sores. Open Sores is updated in the patch. It doesn't have infinite duration anymore. What it does is just any monster that's cursed by you will have 15% of their life reserved, which is really strong. So basically monsters have 15% less life. That's a pretty good ascendancy. So that's the concept. You're tanky again because you have a lot of life. You should have a lot of ES. You have a lot of life leech. And monsters are really slow around you because they're enfeebled and temp chained. And possibly you can put your enfeebled and temp chains on steroids if you master of hexes. And you could also like go up over here. Yeah, let's just put this like sure strength, and then like go here and get hindered capabilities. You're already investing in Zone of Control to make the AoE around you for your curses larger. And this also hinders monsters as well. So, with the added slow from hindered capabilities, added slow from Zone of Control, and the added effectiveness of Master of Hexes, this is probably like how I'm going to spend it to 90, just because I want to see how those empowered curses will work. But there's a lot of different things that you can do with your extra skill points. I just might add more damage to the build, or I might switch it to crit if I really can up the deeps. But the issue is that's going to require like a lot of expensive gear, and just going with Open Sores will be cheaper and probably more effective. I'm only investing enough crit into this build so I can trigger the if you've crit recently, you get more cast speed or whatever the case is. Okay, that's basically the amount of crit I'm trying to fit in the build. I don't really care about a really high crit chance for ignoring elemental resistances or whatever, is because again, this build will freeze monsters really quickly, and once a monster is frozen, you get to ignore all of their positive elemental resistances. And if you can fit enough spirit in this build, you can run elemental weakness as a curse and have 3 curses instead of 2 curses. So if you look at my blasphemy right here. And speaking of, let's just go over the skills and the skill rotation and kind of how all this stuff works. So Frostbolt, which you probably get like level 5 or whatever, you get it early in the game. It's going to be your Pew Pew skill. It's going to be your main attack skill. Why Frostbolt? Well, because you can trigger Snap on it whenever you want. So a monster doesn't have to be frozen, doesn't have to have an elemental element on it to trigger Snap. And Cold Snap has been updated in the new patch. It's just called Snap, and it does some cool stuff. But Frostbolt is there because it will basically let you cast your Snap whenever your Snap has enough meta energy to cast on your Cast on Elemental Elements. You'll be using Cast on Elemental Elements. I put Cast on Freeze here, but it's really Cast on Elemental Elements. And you're going to include it with Snap. And your Frostbolt will help freeze things really quickly. Frostbolt also has more effective chill now. It does less damage. But it's really there because, again, you can blow it up with Snap. And it chills monsters and, should be pretty effective at keeping monsters frozen. Orb of Storms has been updated as well. You don't need to use a lightning skill to trigger it, so it will trigger off of your Frostbolt. Also, what's great about Orb of Storms as part of the new patch is it will create lightning infusion remnants on the ground. So that's useful. Another thing is Flame Wall. Flame Wall is great because your Frostbolts will go through it and they'll get added fire damage. In addition to that, Flame Wall also creates lightning or fire infusion remnants on the ground, and you can power Flame Wall with the lightning remnants from Orb of Storms. So this will Orbistorms will combo Flame Wall, and then if a Frostbolt goes through the Flame Wall, that's empowered or infused with lightning, and will get added fire and added lightning, which is nice. If you can fit enough spirit in the build, and fitting enough spirit for this, you might have to run, unfortunately, like 2 Scepters to get all the extra spirit. It just depends. I'll be playing around with things, but I really want to try Frost Darts. Frost Darts is a new skill. Frost Darts. It's an intelligence skill, and I also have that on cast on elemental elements as well, so that I require another 100 spirit in the build. And basically, what it does is if a monster is frozen, or you get a frost infusion on Frost Darts, it makes Frost Darts much more stronger, and it's a multi projectile attack, and these projectiles will also be going through your flame wall as well. So that's kind of what I want. Basically, Frostbolt, you shoot those out, that will trigger your snap, that will trigger your Frost Darts. You drop Orbistorms and Flame Wall, and so that will just like empower all of your spells. So you'll be doing everything as frozen to start with, shocked and ignited as well. Then Trinity, they updated Trinity in the patch, and Trinity works on spells now, if you can see here. And so Trinity, basically, this is a more damage multiplier for all of my spells that I'll be adding in here. And because I'll be doing all the elemental damage types and all my stuff, all of my spells will basically chain infusion like each other, which is really great. Another thing that I'll be running with this build is a new persistent buff called Siphon Elements, and that will basically make it so I get more infusions on the ground that I can pick up to power my Orbistorms, my Flame Wall, and also my Frost Darts. So that should be good. Now, Blasphemy, you'll be running this with just Enfeeble at 60 with Enfeeble and Temp Chains, which you can run without any special items because you are going for Whispers of Doom in this build. So this right here is 120 spirit. Now, if you put like a Doedre's Ring on, or you get some way to get an additional curse in this build, then you can also, for 60 more spirit, you can add Elemental Weakness as a curse as well, and that should be pretty strong, especially if you've invested in all of these curse magnitudes and other things on the tree. And then another thing is Arctic Armor. This is a persistent buff. This build isn't running Ghost Shroud or things like that. So I figured this would be a pretty good persistent buff to run. So if a monster hits you, it'll most likely freeze that monster. This build has a lot of added cold damage, or increased cold damage, and ways to make your cold spells stronger. So Arctic Armor should be pretty strong. So just to kind of recap the concept, you don't need any special uniques for this build. It should basically be firing on most cylinders halfway through the campaign. Frostbolt, Orbistorms, Flame Wall. I don't think these are super high level gems, and you can always check when you get them by like going to, let's see, Sorceress. So we got you can also put Frost Bomb in there initially, but you got Frostbolt, and you got Snap right here. So you should go. The build should come online pretty quickly. Okay. Yeah. So that's the build. I will come out with an updated build video on it. I'm only path this out to level 80 in terms of how you want to path it. I would suggest like coming up over here. Probably coming over here because you'll probably, as you're leveling through the campaign, you'll probably have a mix of different like elemental skills to use. And so this will just, put all of your damage on steroids. And you come up here, and I'd probably go in this direction to get like the whole Arcane Surge stuff. So I'd probably like run down here, grab that. This stuff is also pretty strong as well. It'll again buff up all of your spells. Then eventually what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to come up over here and get this Heavy Frost and the extra freeze buildup and the extra, do 50% increased damage to frozen monsters from Thin Ice. That's pretty strong. So, and then again, that's all damage types. That's not just cold damage. Yeah, so that's the concept. It's you just pew pew with your Frostbolt. That will then basically create a chain reaction of cold snaps, and you drop your Orbistorms and Flame Walls whenever you're dealing with something serious. That will then kind of empower your Frostbolts and empower your other spells, and everything is going to be dropping a bunch of Infusion Remnants, and you can pick up the Infusion Remnants, and that will make all your spells stronger. And I really want to, hopefully I can get enough Spirit in here, and I can put Frost Darts in here as well. So the Frost Darts will shoot out on frozen monsters and do a bunch of like shotgun crazy stuff and put a bunch of stuff on the ground. It should be really cool. That's the build. Should be pretty safe to get off the ground. You get that life leech right away. Yeah, it should be just pretty comfortable. And the defensive layers I like. You got your life leech, your ES, and everything's frozen, and everything's slowed, and everything's enfeebled. And yeah, that's the concept. Give me a couple days to come out with an updated video. I'm not quite sure the itemization yet. I'm not sure if I want to run 2 scepters or a wand and a scepter. I think these items are relatively. I don't know how unrealistic this stuff is. I've never made a mage character before. I've always just really ignored wands and stuff. And I'll also come out with a new loot filter for this build as I progress through the game. I'm just going to be basically using the Neversink to start. But as I tweak this build and kind of understand what I want to do, then I could come up with a tailored loot filter, and I'll be filling out the support gems. But that's basically Frostbolt, Orbistorms, Flame Wall, cast on elemental elements plus snap, fit Trinity in there, and get 2 curses on your Blasphemy, enfeeble Temp Chains, and siphon elements, which doesn't exist in Path of Building yet, and Arctic Armor. So yeah, that's the concept. In terms of the wand and the scepter, I have Galvanic Field and Discipline. That just seemed to make the most sense, but I don't know. I'll play around with things. Maybe there's a unique that could be useful. One unique that could be useful, again, is the Dodri's Damning Rim. This is a cheap unique from my understanding, and it's a way that you could basically, if you get 60 more Spirit from somewhere else, you can then put in Elemental Weakness instead of Hypothermia, because this skill gem won't exist anymore. All right, guys. Well, hopefully you enjoyed that, and feel free to check out this channel a couple days from now. I'll try to have a build update. All right, take care. Bye.